Greetings, everyone. This is Preetham Peter, principal at InfoEdge. I'm here with our guest for the webcast today, Elwin Wong, who's the CISO at Ross Stores, a global retail firm based in the US. We're here to talk today about the recently released SEC cybersecurity rules, specifically drilling into some of the details around materiality. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation. We're very excited to have Elwin on the webcast today and to talk about this topic that we believe is important to many of you. So Elwin, as you know, the SEC released pretty recently this guideline on, or the cyber rules related to public companies, right? Relating to disclosures that must be filed in 10Ks and 8Ks. The polling we've done, admittedly unscientific, indicates that these are a critical focus area for many cyber leaders. Just as a general question, how are your peers and industry generally reacting to these rules?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're all reacting to it, especially those in publicly traded companies. So what I've been seeing and talking to other CISOs, we're all developing plans of action in terms of meeting the requirements. So the 10Ks have to be updated with disclosures, and by the year end. A lot of CISOs are also developing 8K templates. So if and when there's a material incident, then they have something kind of ready to populate, and that has gone through all the reviews and approvals from their GC and so forth. So they're more prepared. I've also seen a lot of organizations reviewing their cyber incident management process to make sure they tighten up their processes, make sure their severity levels are clear when they assign, classify risk of incidents and things like that, because they just want everything tightened up just in case the SEC starts to look more closely, that they have documented good processes in place.
Got it. Okay, great. That's good background. As you mentioned, it's all about disclosures, right? And having disclosures that are then defensible. There's sort of two parts of that, right? There's disclosures that are made in the 10K, which are more related to how are you doing cyber risk management and governance. And then, as you mentioned, specifically disclosures, in the case of, God forbid, an incident, that would go into your 8K. Sort of the common factor underlying both of these is materiality. So getting a clear understanding of what materiality is and what it means is vital to meeting the SEC rules. What's the industry view on how critical materiality is to compliance with the rules? How important are you seeing this as a topic amongst your peers?
Yeah, I think what I've seen is it's a pretty broad range. So I think some organizations and other CISOs I've talked to, they feel like they have their current incident management process can account for materiality determination. So they're just leveraging existing processes. Other CISOs I talk to, and I kind of lean that way as well, is they're developing materiality frameworks, and leveraging those frameworks to really try to quantify what that risk is, to, as you said, to create a more defensible position. So if the SEC comes, knocking and looking at, how did you determine materiality? You have some tools and frameworks in place that you can demonstrate that, hey, we did follow a structured process to determine our risk and materiality.
Okay. I think we're certainly seeing similar varied approaches to this. I think if we kind of step back and look at how information security as a practice and in terms of how linked it is to the business has evolved over the past 15-20 years, this is, we think, yet another step towards getting more business orientation to information security, right? And organizations, in our experience, do run the gamut. Some are sort of nominally business oriented, kind of red, yellow, green type of stuff. And on the other end of the spectrum, they're highly, quantitative, linked to very specific business impacts or ranges of impacts, right? Um, our take is that these new requirements, disclosure requirements, create potentially additional regulatory teeth, right, to drive an even more business-oriented approach to information security. Do you see this as kind of another step towards, bringing information security leaders and business leaders closer together to align on, you know, uh, just the topic of information security risk and having, a more robust and inclusive conversation on, how do we manage the risk? What is the risk? Those kinds of things.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I do see that, that engagement, that partnership kind of coming together more. I think when you look at the finance side, they've been doing risk management, for a long time. When we look at SOX, Sarbanes-Oxley, and so forth, there are, when you talk about deficiencies and material weaknesses, materiality, there are already materiality thresholds from a financial perspective, and that could be 5% of total assets or 3 to 5% of operating income. So that has been established, more on the kind of finance side. Now it's really merging that with kind of the cybersecurity side in terms of incidents and how to quantify what loss expectancy of a cyber incident is. So it is bringing those together. What I've seen at other organizations, they're developing risk governance committees. Maybe they have them already in place. They're bringing those conversations into that forum to talk about, cyber risk and materiality. I've also seen organizations adjust their incident management processes when they have an incident. They may engage their crisis management team, but within that crisis team, they're developing what I might call an impact analysis conduit team, where they are focused on assessing and analyzing materiality, where other teams are focused more on incident response and containment and recovery of business operations. So there is this merger of the two and a specific focus now around materiality analysis.
Okay. I mean, listening to you talk about that, I get the sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm gonna use a metaphor here. That making sure you can do your 10K disclosure properly is sort of the homework for the test of having to do an 8K, right? So you got to have, you know, again, you may not have it for the specific incident that hopefully doesn't occur, but if and when it does occur, you may not have it specifically for that incident, but you got to have, you know, the framework and the processes and thresholds and whatnot, in place as part of your work to, confidently make that 10K disclosure. Is that a fair metaphor, Elwin, in your opinion?
I I think so. Now we do have to be careful about the disclosures and the 10Ks. I think generally when I talk to other CISOs and also my own opinion, we don't want to put too much detail into the 10K, which could expose us to threat actors getting
Right.
information and then understanding our playbook in terms of security, which will put organizations at risk. But giving the SEC enough information and the shareholders that you have a good foundation of a comprehensive cybersecurity program. You follow certain frameworks like NIST. You may follow a zero trust principles, things like that. I think being able to convey that you do have a processes and a solid comprehensive cybersecurity program to put kind of shareholders at ease with, and finding that right balance of not putting too much detail into those disclosures.
Got it. As you mentioned earlier, there's folks that are, using some of the other guidance from the SEC or, historical practices around materiality to inform, how materiality would play into the 10K disclosure, the 8K disclosure. Again, hopefully we'll never come to an 8K, but definitely the 10K. And to your point, it does need to be done very carefully, right? That you don't disclose the actual risks, but more about the process, that's employed. Um, we're seeing, organizations, again, sort of running the gamut, on the one end, sort of being very, red, yellow, green around risk. And on the other end being, hey, here's our annual loss expectancy and here's the components of that, yada, yada. You know, I guess some of this is, a wait and see type of game, right? Where, organizations are always keen to understand, I don't want to be the, first one out the gate, sharing everything, out there, especially given some of the attendant risks that you mentioned, right? To what extent, are you seeing your peers in that wait and see mode? Let me do something, that my lawyers sign off on and what have you, right? But I'm not, I want to do something to make sure I'm not going to be seen as a, somewhere out in left field. And I'm going to wait and see, what others do, whether it's, folks in my industry, other, public companies in my industry, other public companies of similar size or what have you, right? You see that kind of playing a role in how people are thinking about at least this disclosure that's coming up here in like literally 2 months.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of CISOs, other organizations are taking that wait and see. If they're fortunate enough to not be the first to have to disclose, depending on when their year end, their fiscal year end is, they're really just trying to check the box in terms of what are the minimum requirements around the disclosure, and then, as you said, wait and see what people bring forward in their disclosures, and then they have an opportunity to adjust. So it will be interesting to see, some of the first ones, what do those disclosures look like? And I think it will be dynamic and evolving over time.
Got it. All right. Now I want to ask you to put on your Nostradamus hat, and think about, the next 2 to 3 years, right? Obviously, this rule has been a long time, not that long, but, non-trivial amount of time coming. Um, as you know, and as we know, this industry and, the factors that drive it are extremely dynamic and evolving all the time. Um, what's your take? And what are your peers thinking in terms of how these disclosure requirements may evolve over time, right? Are they going to become more stringent? Is going to be more examination? That's part one of the question. Part two of the question is, do you see any sort of external / uncontrolled factors, e.g., spate of breaches, impacting how policymakers think about this and laws and rules evolve?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of different point of views out there. I think, my point of view, I think it will evolve and change. As we saw the ruling that was passed, the proposed ruling, they really backed off on several areas. So I think one of the areas that could come back in, later is you're supposed to report material incidents, but they also wanted you to report non-material incidents that in aggregate were material. So they kind of backed off that. I think that is probably more challenging to figure out how, what are those non-material incidents in aggregate. I also have seen them back off on the cyber expertise on the boards. They kind of shifted and said, "Hey, we want to understand, the management expertise around cyber," and they kind of set aside the board requirements. So I think those are areas that could come back in the future. I see this whole cyber SEC ruling, similar to on the financial side when we had SOX and things like that, where there was a focus around integrity of financials. That's when CFOs were, really, there was a focus around CFOs. They needed financial expertise on boards. There's also potentially a need for external audits and external assessments.
Hmm.
I think that could be the trajectory that we move towards around cybersecurity. You've got to have independent auditors to do some assertion around your cybersecurity programs, and Also, more regulation and more stringent requirements. I don't think we're going to see cybersecurity incidents decrease. I think it's going to continue to increase, and we're going to see more and more disclosures that we've ever seen before. So it's going to be interesting, and over the next few years, how that really evolves.
No, that's great points. I think your points just now, provide a good food for thought, and you know topics that need to be considered as leaders think about what to do over the next 2 or 3 years. You talked about the external review. Who knows if that's going to become a reality, but it's a possible outcome. So can we do something, again, not just for that, but that could be repurposed for that at some point in the future, right? So how can we think about where the regulations may go and be prepared and not kind of be caught with our pants down, feet flat, whatever metaphor you want to use. um, Excellent. Well, thank you, Elwin, for your time today. It's been extremely insightful hearing some of your thoughts and viewpoints on SEC cyber rule materiality. Thank you, audience, for participating virtually in this conversation. We hope you'll find this interesting. There will be an associated blog post related to this conversation that we'll be posting as well as soon as the webcast is published. Hope everyone has a great day, and talk to you all in the next one.
Thank you.